Hi guys, sorry, but we've just had massive technical issues over on Webinar Ninja tonight, and it does not appear to be playing nicely. And we've had a few emails saying that it reached maximum capacity and people couldn't get in. So obviously, super popular webinar, which was going to be really awesome, but Webinar Ninja not playing nicely. So I think from the 5 minutes that I was in there that you couldn't hear me, because I don't think anyone could even see my chat box popping up. So I have just left a message in there saying, hey, jump on over to Facebook Live, because unfortunately nobody could hear me on Webinar Ninja tonight. So the only difference being if I speak to you here, you just can't see the slideshow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through the slides that I was going to show you tonight on Webinar Ninja, but then I'll also send you a recorded copy of the webinar with the slides through to your email address, so you can actually watch it with the slides and all the visuals that you're missing tonight. But we will run through that information now on Facebook Live, since Webinar Ninja was not working tonight. So really sorry that it wasn't working. I can see some people are joining us now on Facebook Live, so that's cool. If you can hear us and you're here to hear the webinar that you missed on Webinar Ninja, just give us a little thumbs up or a smiley face so I know that you are here for that webinar. So the webinar tonight was going to be on basically 5 strategies which I can tell you will improve your child's nighttime sleep. So that's what I'm going to talk through now. And if you, silly technology, Catherine, not fun tonight, but that's okay. Facebook's pulling through, and you just can't see my really cool pink PowerPoint that I was going to show you, but I will email it out to you, which is why it was great that you all registered, so we can send you the recording of the webinar with the PowerPoint slides and everything straight to your inbox so you can watch it in your own time. So I'm going to talk through the lecture and the seminar that I was going to give tonight anyway on Facebook Live, so you can join us through here rather than Webinar Ninja. Alright, so I would assume if you're following us on Facebook that you know who I am. I'm Emma, and I am the owner of Baby Sleep Consultant Australia and New Zealand, and I am a certified infant and child sleep consultant, and we actually train and certify sleep consultants internationally, so we really know what we're doing. And hi Paula, I am also a Happiest Baby on the Block educator, which is awesome. It helps with newborn settling and that kind of thing. But yeah, so that's what I do. I have 3 of my own kids as well, which they are all thankfully asleep tonight, so I can talk to you guys. And yeah, let's run through what we were going to run through on Webinar Ninja tonight, which is basically the seminar that I gave at the New Zealand Baby Show in Auckland this year. Hi Kirsty, or Christy, hi Raywin. Thanks for jumping over to Facebook Live. Hopefully you're getting the message from Webinar Ninja that we are not there and we are here. How do you register? There was a link on our Facebook page to register for the webinar, so you can probably still register for it and we can send it out to you. It was just an event that you could sign up to and jump onto the link there and sign into Webinar Ninja. 2 quick steps and you're all registered. So the 5 strategies that I want to talk about tonight are addressing your baby's napping situation, ensuring that your baby can self-settle, teaching your baby to resettle is number 3, adding in some really positive sleep associations, and then increasing your baby's daytime calorie intake, because obviously how well they sleep at night is very much dependent on the calories which they consume during the day. Hi Emma, and hi Nathan. Okay, so let's jump into naps and why they matter. So why does it matter if our babies nap? And I think this is confusing for a lot of adults, and especially first-time parents, because we assume that if our child doesn't sleep during the day, they'll be super tired at night and they're more likely to actually sleep better at night. But unfortunately, the opposite is actually true. And the worse your baby sleeps during the day, often the worse they'll sleep at night. So your baby's daytime napping habits do really matter. So if your baby doesn't nap well and they don't get enough daytime sleep, they become overtired. And we know that overtired babies produce stress hormones. So they end up having elevated levels of cortisol and adrenaline, and these hormones basically wreak havoc on their nighttime sleep patterns. So these are natural hormones, and we expect babies to be producing these in certain doses over the day. And there's even a natural cycle to how much cortisol a baby produces, and this naturally tailors off in the early evening leading up to midnight, and then it naturally picks up again after midnight. And this means that they fall asleep and they go into a deep sleep, and then the elevated or the rising levels of cortisol end up waking your baby up as we head towards morning. And this even happens for adults. Your cortisol levels wake you up in the morning as they start to rise. So what happens when babies are overtired though? They produce crazy amounts of cortisol and adrenaline, and their hormones are all out of whack, and we try to make them go to sleep for the night. And this basically means that they can't get into that really beautiful deep sleep between sort of bedtime, 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and midnight. And instead, these overtired hormones means that your baby wakes sort of every 2 or 1 or 2 hours overnight. And this is them kind of being what we would call ripped from a partial sleep cycle, ripped awake due to these hormones, which are preventing them from getting into a really nice deep sleep. So often when we see a baby over sort of 4 or 6 months old waking that frequently overnight, it is often because they're overtired, and they can appear like they're having nightmares or they're in pain. They can wake up really crying, and it's because they're basically really quickly jumping from a really deep sleep into that full-on awake, rather than naturally coming up into a sort of partial arousal and then going back into a deep sleep, or coming up into a light sleep gently, which is what a baby who's not overtired would do. So your baby's daytime naps absolutely matter. Sarah, maybe I'm still a baby. Yeah, adults don't cope with being overtired easy as well. I mean, we have sort of coping strategies, and we do end up going off to sleep, but lots of adults do not cope with being overtired, especially adults who work too much and spend too much time in front of their screens. But that's another story. Okay, so we know these hormones can make a baby wake up after a partial sleep cycle rather than a full sleep cycle overnight. And so this is going to disrupt and sort of play havoc on their nighttime sleep. So what we want to do is make sure your baby is napping well if we want them to sleep well at night. So exactly how much sleep does my baby need? Hi Dale, and hi Christy. Okay, so we were kind of pitching tonight at sort of 6 months plus babies, so the information I'm going to give you now is relevant for that kind of 6 months plus age group. So how much sleep does a baby need during the day? A 6 to 8 month old baby needs 3 naps a day, usually 3 naps, and they need around 3 hours of sleep. So we're talking quite a range there. Your 6 month old baby's definitely going to be having 3 naps a day, and your 8 month old baby might have dropped from 3 naps to 2, and that 3 hours a day might be give or take. You know, it might be 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, 3.5 hours, but that's pretty much the approximate amount of sleep that a 6 to 8 month old baby needs. Hi Natasha, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you've come over from the failed webinar ninja tonight. Once we hit the 8 to 15 month age group, that's when we can be really confident that the baby only needs 2 naps a day and around 2.5 hours sleep in total. So we've definitely dropped to 2 naps in that 8 to 15 month window, and just 2.5 hours sleep is pretty much all they need. Again, give or take that 30-minute window, if, you know, because all babies are a little bit different. Once we hit the 15 to 18 month threshold, which is where things often turn a bit haywire for lots of parents, they need around 1 sleep a day, so we'll often drop to 1 sleep, and we're talking 1.5 to 2 hours sleep. So this is how much sleep we want to be aiming for optimal nighttime sleep. But again, give or take half an hour depending on your baby. But if your baby's having like double the amount of sleep I've just mentioned, and they're not sleeping well at night, it might be time to cut down on their sleep. And if they're having sort of half the minimum sleep I've just talked about, they're probably going to be overtired, and those stress hormones are ruining their nighttime sleep. A really good rule of thumb to remember is the 4-hour rule. So the 4-hour rule means if your baby is having 3 naps a day, then the time from their second nap to bedtime will be about 4 hours. But there'll be a 3rd nap thrown in there. So, for example, if your baby wakes up at 2:30 in the afternoon, I want them to sleep for the night by about 6:30, which is 4 hours later. So we're talking maybe a 6-month-old. But you'll throw a little 15 or 30-minute sleep in there around 4 o'clock. So 4 hours from second nap until bedtime, but there'll be a 3rd nap in there to tie them over. Once your baby drops to 2 sleeps, that 4-hour rule still applies. So they'll go maximum 4 hours from the end of their second sleep to bedtime. So if you want a 7 p.m. bedtime, then your baby really needs to sleep until at least 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you are happy with 6:30 bedtime, then the nap could be over at 2:30 in the afternoon. And that's a maximum, that 4 hours. So don't hold your baby out for the 4-hour window. If they're crying and they're tired and cranky, just put them to bed. But keep that in mind as a maximum amount of time you want your baby awake for in the evening to avoid those overtired hormones ruining your baby's nighttime sleep. Hi, Megan. What age do they drop the daytime sleep? Between 2 and 3. Usually between 2.5 and 3 years, Ashley, they'll drop daytime sleeps altogether. Okay, so that's how much daytime sleep your baby needs to avoid those overtired hormones ruining their nighttime sleep, and a little explanation on why overtiredness is ruining your nighttime sleep. A little tip that we often recommend for our clients in this situation, and I think I've even written about it in next month's Little Treasures magazine, is assisted napping. So assisted napping is when we basically do anything we can to get our babies to sleep super easy. So if your baby naps well in the pushchair or stroller, just take them for a walk for their naps. If they like the front pack, you might front pack them for their naps. You might feed to sleep or rock to sleep. Anything like that is called an assisted nap because you're 100% assisting them to sleep. The reason we would do this is because we want to work on your nighttime sleep first. So we want to get on top of those overtired hormones and make sure your baby's not going to bed overtired and you're not stressed out during the day trying to work on their naps. So if their naps are crazy bad and your nighttime sleep's not fantastic either, then try some assisted naps for a couple of days, and you'll find that you'll get on top of the sleep debt, and they won't be producing these overtired stress hormones anymore. And then when you go to try and work on their nighttime sleep to consolidate it, you're going to be a lot more successful really quickly. So it's just a short-term strategy, working on assisted naps for a couple of days. Sarah, it doesn't matter if your 3.5-year-old still has an afternoon sleep. Not if they sleep well at night. There was an interesting study which we have blogged about on the website, which you can go and have a look at. Came out, I think, last year now. The years kind of merged together for me, but I think it was last year. And it basically said that the research they'd done had indicated that between 2.5 and 3 years old, if kids did not start to drastically reduce down their naps or drop their naps, they were starting to have delayed onset of sleep in the evenings and fragmented sleep at night. And the problem with this was that parents didn't even know a lot of these toddlers were either delaying their bedtime or having the fragmented night sleep. So there were cameras in the room and that sort of thing, and the toddlers were just in their beds happily awake in the middle of the night for sometimes an hour or more at a time. So then they're obviously waking up in the morning tired and needing their nap, and the cycle kind of continues, whereas they were actually ready to drop their naps, but the sort of signs had been missed. So between 2.5 and 3 years old, we're definitely heading towards more adult type sleep, where we're focusing on most of the sleep happening at night and not relying on naps during the day anymore. And just to be aware that if you do hold on to your naps for too long, sort of much past 3, then it can start to detrimentally affect your nighttime sleep, and you might not be aware of it. We can often tell because parents will call us and say, but my 3.5-year-old is so tired during the day, like they really need their nap. And aside from them being low in iron or anything like that, it's often because they are waking in the middle of the night and not going back to sleep on their own. Okay, I'm going to keep working through the slides which we were going to show in the webinar tonight. So I'm sorry if I miss your questions, but I will try to answer them as we're going. And otherwise, we will be sending you through a recording of the webinar later on, since we have your email addresses. Okay, so after assisted napping, we want to talk about self-settling. So what does it mean to self-settle? This can be confusing for some parents. I think there's either parents who believe that if your baby can self-settle, you must have let them cry it out, which is not true, 100%. And then there's other parents who are confused about self-settling and that they think their baby either has a dummy and is self-settling, and if they're under 8 months, they're probably still reliant on the parents to put the dummy in. So I wouldn't call that self-settling because they do need the parent to help them get to sleep. If they're over 8 months and they can put their dummy in themselves, then I would say yes, that's self-settling. The other thing which can be confusing is the line between sort of going to sleep drowsy or awake, and parents can often be rocking their baby until they're very, very drowsy and then thinking they're self-settling, and I wouldn't call that self-settling either. So self-settling for me is putting a baby down absolutely wide awake, so they're smiling at you and they're 100% aware they're going to bed, and then they go through the process of making themselves drowsy and putting themselves to sleep. So that's what I would call self-settling. Why does self-settling help with your baby's nighttime sleep? There are those babies who are the exception to the rule, where mum might feed them to sleep at bedtime, say 5:45 or 7:15 in the evening, and they don't wake up till morning. So we'd be thinking there, that baby can't self-settle, mum feeds her to sleep. But clearly baby can self-settle, because every baby is waking 2 to 4 hours, every 2 to 4 hours overnight at the end of those partial or complete sleep cycles. And if a baby can self-settle, they'll wake up, roll over, have a look around the room, and go back to sleep. So that is self-settling. So usually we would think if the baby's not self-settling at bedtime, they will not self-settle through the night and at the end of their sleep cycles, and they'll wake up crying, looking for assistance to get back to sleep. So that's where we would look at, how does your baby actually get to sleep? Do they need to be rocked? Do they need a pacifier? Do they need to be fed or patted or held, or one of those kind of associations? And if they are dependent on those things, then I would say they're not self-settling, and that's possibly having a detrimental effect on their nighttime sleep. So that's why self-settling matters, and why it's important if we do want to consolidate nighttime sleep, because there is all of those sleep cycles happening overnight where your baby needs to keep practicing and putting into place all night, going back to sleep on their own or self-settling. So how can you teach your baby to self-settle? This is like the number one question that we get asked pretty much all day, every day. And it is a really in-depth topic. So we're going to look at the two most popular self-settling techniques which we do with our clients. And I'm going to give you a quick overview on how to put those techniques into place. Unfortunately, it will be quite quick because I do have my other points to kind of get through tonight, but lucky for you, the next webinar, which I promise you there'll be no technical difficulties, will be completely on self-settling and how you can put these strategies into place and a really in-depth look at them. So here's a quick overview of our two most popular techniques. So the first one being pick up, put down, which is a more gentle technique and incredibly popular with our parents. This technique works from about 4 months on. So between 4 or 5 months, if you're wanting to start working on self-settling and moving away from assisting to sleep, then you could try some pick up, put down. You would choose this technique because you want to stay in the room with your baby, and you're not keen on a cry-based technique like leaving the room and letting your baby cry. So this technique will work all the way through until sort of 18 months plus. The only difference becomes when your baby is sitting or standing up, then it turns into put down, put down. So instead of pick up, put down, once your baby is standing, the technique is put down, put down. And then apart from that, all the same rules apply. So if you're going to try some pick up, put down, you're going to stay in your room with the baby while you put them to bed. Once they go into the bed fully awake but calm, I want you to sit by the cot and use your voice and your proximity to help them to settle. So you might talk to them or sing to them or shush quietly, and just give them a little bit of space to try and put themselves to sleep. If they start crying, then that's when we're going to start responding. So your 6-month-old baby starts crying in the cot at bedtime and you're sitting there right next to them. What you're going to do is you're going to give them at least a minute of your voice to try and settle. So shushing, like I said, or singing to them, that kind of thing. If they're not responding after a minute, you might reach in and touch them. So you might stroke their tummy or their back, or if they're crawling around the cot like crazy, you might pick them up a little bit and kind of shuffle them back to the middle of the cot near you so you can rub their back a little bit or stroke their tummy. You're just going to do some touching, which calms your baby down, and every baby is different. So you might know that your baby responds to having their face touched versus having their tummy touched. Just do whatever you think is going to work for your baby. If your proximity and your voice and your touch does not calm them down, then you're going to pick them up and you're going to calm them down in your arms with a nice little cuddle and maybe a bum pat and a shush. Once they're calm in your arms, you're going to put them back in the cot and start that process again. You're going to sit by the cot, use your voice and proximity, and try and settle them again in that way. But giving them that space to actually self-settle rather than actually you putting them to sleep. Eventually, I know it sounds kind of like unicorns, but eventually they do actually put themselves to sleep. It does take sort of the first time around 45 minutes, so be prepared to kind of be really consistent and really calm and patient and just wait them out, because they will eventually go to sleep. And that is my daughter coming home knocking on the door. So I will be back. Sorry, joys of husbands away for work. Okay, so you're going to pick them up, pop them back down, and then sit by the cot and kind of wait for them to settle. It does take around 45 minutes, but you are being very responsive. So you're going to respond to what they need. You know, if they don't need anything and they're just kind of mucking around, then you're just going to sit there, close your eyes, pretend you're asleep, and model the behavior that you expect from them. If it takes longer than 45 minutes, Hannah, really good question. If it's taking a lot longer than 45 minutes and they're not really upset, then that's cool. Just sit there and wait them out. If they're just mucking around, and this does happen with older babies, you know, because they don't get that tired, and they will happily play with the zip on their sleeping bag for over an hour. If it's taking a long time that way, that's fine. I literally would just close my eyes and just be there and wait for them to fall asleep. If it's taking more than 45 minutes and they're very upset, then I would consider whether or not the technique is not a good fit for that baby, or if you're perhaps not doing it too well, because it really shouldn't take that long, and they shouldn't really be that upset. Often, if it is taking a long time, and parents kind of find this hard to acknowledge, but often parents are doing a little bit too much if it's taking a long time. So they're picking up too frequently, or they're kind of really in the baby's face with their settling, and the baby's temperament is such that actually the baby is like, just back off a bit, mum. I need a little bit of space here to figure this out on my own. So can you just sit on the chair and give me a minute, mum? And mum's kind of more in there trying to do a bit too much for the baby. So if it is taking too long, it might either not be a great fit for your baby's temperament, or you might be doing a little bit too much in terms of actually physically settling the baby. I think I saw a question saying picking up my baby seems to make him worse. He's 11 months. Yeah, so once they're sitting or standing, we don't pick them up. So when they stand up, we put them down rather than pick them up. So that we just lie them down on the cot, and then we do the other stages of sitting by the cot, talking to them, shushing to them, that kind of thing. They stand up, we put them back down. And you do a lot of putting down. You give them a little bit of space, and then you put them back down again. But there's no picking up once they're standing, because they get irate if you pick them up and pop them back down. Because at that age, they kind of have the cognitive thought processes that they're thinking, great, mum's picked me up, we're probably going to leave the room. And then you don't leave the room, you pop them back in the cot, and they are furious. So it's more consistent and a lot more successful if you just use put down once they're standing, rather than pick up, put down. But that'll be a whole lot clearer in the next seminar on settling techniques, if that's kind of confusing. Okay, the other really popular technique that we use is spaced soothing. So this is kind of our version of controlled crying, but we prefer a little bit more soothing. So you're basically going to leave the room once you put your baby down to bed. This works again in the sort of minimum 4 to 6 months age group, so it's not a newborn technique. And this is going to work for those babies who are more frustrated at the parents in the room with them. You know, they're often overstimulated by their parents being in there. So they do get a little bit more frustrated with that technique. So we'll choose a space soothing for those babies if that's what the parents are happy with. You're going to leave the room for about 2 to 5 minutes and let them cry for that length of time. Then you're going to come into the room for a couple of minutes and try and soothe them. In that couple of minutes, you can use all of the things at the top of the hierarchy of self-soothing that we've talked about. So you can use your voice and your touch and your proximity, similar to pick up, put down. So reach into the cot and you can stroke them, pat them, shush them, sing to them, and really actually work on soothing them for a couple of minutes. You're not going to try and put them to sleep. So if what you are doing is making your baby sleepy, then that's awesome, but now it's time to gap it and get out of the room. So you're not there to make them sleepy. You're just there to calm them down, check they're safe, and console them, and then leave the room. And then you're going to stay up for an extended period of time. So if you started with 2 minutes, you might go to 5 minutes. If you started with 5 or you're up to 5, you might go to 8. And in this kind of scenario, I like to tell people to max it out at about 10 minutes, purely because I don't know your baby and your situation, so I'm not comfortable extending the time past 10 minutes. And 10 minutes will be pretty successful. Heads up, there's a spider on the wall behind you. That's pretty funny because I'm pretty scared of spiders. So I'm going to assume it's really small though. But now I am going to probably keep looking behind me. And again, it'll probably take around 45 minutes, maybe a little bit less if it's a good fit for your baby. And they will end up self-settling. In this technique, regardless of their age, so I know I said with the babies who are standing, don't pick them up. With spaced soothing, even if they're 6 months, so they're not standing, I recommend you try not to pick them up because it is quite confusing for them and it can be a little bit overstimulating. So instead, try to soothe them in the cot with your touch and your voice and proximity. JD has asked how her 7-week-old can self-soothe. It is a little bit too early, so at that stage we're more working on hands-on settling. Stop it with the spider. It's not on this land, there's no spider, but stop telling me there's spiders on my roof. So more hands-on settling at that age. Okay, please stop telling me there's spiders. My 9-month-old sleeps on his own but wakes 5 to 6 times a night and sits. I just put him down, then he sleeps. But it's very tiring and totally disturbed. Yeah, so when they learn to sit, that's often when the movement regression happens like that. So going and putting him down is perfect. Just kidding, Dale. Thank you. No more spider jokes. Natalie, stop it. I have now friends in the Facebook live chat telling me there's spiders in my room. So yeah, sitting up. Once they're sitting up, spend a couple of days lying them down, and after that time they should create some muscle memory, and that should become a lot easier for them to actually lie themselves back down. If it's still happening like a week or 2 later, I think maybe you've become a bit of a prop and you need to give them a bit more time to figure that out on their own. So maybe if you usually wait 1 minute before you go and lie them down, try waiting 5 and then go and lie them down, and the next night try waiting 10 and then go and lie them down. Youngest age, Nicola Wood, for spaced soothing, 4 to 6 months. So no, 3 months is a little bit too young. We would prefer other techniques at that age, but 4 to 6 months is a good time to start working on self-settling if that's your goal as a family. Is that the same for rolling, Alice? Yeah, when they start rolling, definitely. There's an interesting study on that, and you probably shouldn't get me started on all the sleep studies I've read, but the first 3 days, basically, when a baby learns to roll from their back to their tummy, there is a slight heightened risk of SIDS at that time, so we really encourage you to be quite responsive and go and roll them over, because they do feel quite panicked when they first learn to roll onto their tummies. Obviously they won't be swaddled in that time, and they'll have their hands free so they can safely move, but they do feel a little bit of panic when they first learn to roll. So the first 3 days, absolutely go in there, roll them back, and then if you find after a week or 2 they're still looking for you to roll them, then I'd start giving them a little bit of space to do it themselves, and they'll probably end up, Dale, if I have a problem feeding my spider, stop it with the spider jokes. They will probably end up rolling over onto their tummy and actually sleeping that way on their tummy. So that's why it's super important once they do learn to roll from their back to their tummy, that you make sure their cot's really safe and their hands are out of their swaddles and everything's clear around them for sleeping. Jane missed the start of the seminar because my 18-month-old would not sleep. Lucky for you, Facebook records them and it's going to be on Facebook, and I'm going to send you a recorded version with the PowerPoints straight into your inbox, so you've got that forever to look back on. And no spider jokes when I send the PowerPoint out. Okay, so the third point around improving your nighttime sleep situation is resettling. Yes, Dale, stop putting me off with spider jokes. So we've talked about self-settling and now we're going to talk about resettling. And is resettling different to self-settling? Yes, they are 2 different skills, and often a baby will learn to self-settle before they will learn to resettle. So especially when you're looking at the really young babies around 4 months, they'll learn to put themselves to sleep for a nap, but then they won't resettle after 45 minutes because that's another skill. So they need to learn that skill as well. And why is it important? It is important because, like we mentioned, those sleep cycles at night and those partial sleep cycles, every 2 to 4 hours, your baby needs to resettle back to sleep. Otherwise, they're going to be waking up looking for you to help them to go back to sleep at night. So when can my baby learn to resettle? It's different for every baby. I'm sure you probably know lots of newborns out there who you secretly don't like because they can already resettle and they take perfect 2-hour naps. And then there's probably 5 times as many 4-month-olds who cannot resettle and they're catnapping. So if your baby is catnapping, then essentially they haven't yet learned to resettle. But somewhere between 4 and 6 months, we know, hi Jacinta, that they can learn to start to resettle. So that skill will begin definitely between 4 and 6 months, if not prior to that. So we can work on it if your baby is at least 4 to 6 months old. We can work on them resettling themselves for their naps, and they can then apply the skill to working on resettling themselves at night. So if you've got a catnapper and they are over that 4 to 6 months threshold and your nighttime sleep is not fantastic, chances are we need to teach them to resettle themselves so they can apply that skill at night. Hunger or needing to resettle. This is an important question. Overnight, we're wondering, are they hungry or can they resettle? And it's a really hard one. It depends on your baby. So it depends on whether or not they're thriving and gaining lots of weight, how they're fed. So if they're breastfed or formula fed means at a different age they could potentially sleep for longer periods at night, and whether they are on solids or not. But a good rule of thumb is, are they hungry in the morning when you get them up? And if they're not hungry in the morning, then they potentially didn't need at least one of those feeds last night. But if they wake up at 7 o'clock or 6:30 and they're actually starving and wanting to take a full milk feed, then that's a pretty good sign that they were genuinely hungry that night rather than just needing to resettle themselves back to sleep. Okay, the other thing is your sleep associations. So, hi April. My 10-month-old sleeps through about once a week, but usually wakes once or twice, sometimes 3 times a night. Never consistent, even if I follow the same routine. What can I do? April, I would look at what you are doing when your baby does wake 1 to 3 times a night. And then have a listen to the seminar from the start, because I'd say you probably need to work on some self-settling strategies if they are looking for some assistance to get some sleep. How do I stop the 4 p.m. sleep for a 13-month-old? 4 p.m., Hayley? I would make sure that all sleeps at 13 months were happening sort of between 9 and 3. So definitely not a 4 p.m. nap, probably just a really early bedtime rather than a 4 p.m. sleep. Okay, so positive sleep associations. Are your sleep associations actually hindering your baby's nighttime sleep progress? Potentially they are. If your baby's old enough to self-settle and you're wanting to consolidate your nighttime sleep, then any sleep associations that you put in place, we want them to be really positive. So by positive, they're going to help your baby to sleep for longer periods of time, have better sleep, and not involve parent input so much, which can sound really selfish, but if your goal is to consolidate your baby's nighttime sleep, then that essentially is what they need to be able to do, is go to sleep without you. So things like white noise, the baby shusher, or a white noise CD or an app on your phone, any of that sort of thing is a really positive sleep association, and it's going to help with your baby's nighttime sleep. Cuddlies or loveys, so something which your baby can use to put themselves to sleep, like a cookie or a sleepy tot or a muslin. It doesn't require you in the room, and they can essentially use that to self-settle. Bedtime rituals, so doing the same thing at bedtime each night, not necessarily at the exact same time, but just the same sequence of events will help your baby to know, okay, I'm going to bed, this is what's happening. So whether it's a feed and a song, sleeping bag into bed, or a book, a feed, swaddle into bed, the same sort of little sequence of events each night. If your baby's sort of over 12 months, you might want to throw some stories in there before bedtime, that sort of thing. And then if you're going to work on your naps to try and avoid that overtiredness in the evening, then have a nice nap ritual as well. It won't be as drawn out as your nighttime ritual, but it'll be a nice ritual just the same. Nicola, Kirsten and Cara, same here. Anything like teeth and developmental leaps throws nights off, and then I really struggle to get them back on track. Yeah, developmental leaps and teething can throw your nights off. And unfortunately, usually the older your baby is before they learn to self-settle, the more those leaps and things throw them off. But then also it just depends on your baby's temperament, because some babies are just so cruisy that nothing throws them off, you know, like jet lag doesn't throw them off, cutting 4 canines at a time doesn't throw them off. They're literally just the most cruisy kid. And then you'll get the baby who is super sensitive, and you introduce one new food at 9 months and that throws them out for a night, you know, or they have a slight cold and it throws them out for the night. But what I would just stress, if they're going through anything like teething or a developmental leap, or you've traveled, is just that you're really consistent with your settling approach. So I think it's really important, if you can, to come to the next seminar on settling, because you really want to have a settling technique that you 100% know how to deliver on. You know what to do when it goes wrong, you know how to adjust it for your baby's age and whether they're sick, and then you understand the hierarchy of self-soothing. So then when something does happen, like illness or teething, you've got your technique, you know how to adjust it, and you can kind of just hang out at the top of the hierarchy of self-soothing, being responsive and using your voice and touch and proximity, but also not regressing into backing, into perhaps going back to rocking to sleep because your baby's teething, or going back to holding to sleep because they've got a cold, you know. It's about still being responsive to their needs, but knowing that once they've learnt that skill, they should still be able to put that into place overnight. My guy, Kirsten, is a cruise, but the leaps always throw him despite the same routine every night since he was born. Looking forward to seminar 2. Yeah, we'll go into heaps of detail about settling then. And I think it's really actually probably the most important thing in the world to match your settling technique with your baby's temperament and your parenting style, because if that's all in a line, then you're going to be really consistent and really happy with what you're doing. Whereas if you're just doing something that your girlfriend suggested, which worked for her baby, but you have completely different parenting styles, you're probably not going to be that consistent with the approach. So back to our associations that we were talking about, getting all distracted by our questions there. The associations that I would consider whether or not they're having a detrimental effect on your night's sleep is things like dummy associations, or rocking to sleep, feeding to sleep, holding to sleep. So those kind of associations could potentially mean that your baby is going to wake up for you to assist them back to sleep overnight, which if you're happy to do, rock on. I don't have an issue with it. That's cool. If you want to keep rocking your baby to sleep, just keep doing it. So that's really awesome. Don't panic. But if you want to consolidate your baby's nighttime sleep, then we would consider ditching those associations, putting some really positive ones in place, and working on the self-settling strategies that we're going to talk about. So if your baby is waking up for you to put a dummy in, or to rock them back to sleep, hold them, or feed them back to sleep, then that's potentially something that we need to reconsider. And it can get tricky when you're thinking, is this a feed to sleep, or are they actually hungry? But like I said, it's important to look at whether they're hungry in the morning, whether they're taking a proper feed, or whether you can feel kind of they're just feeding back to sleep. Okay. And then one of our, I think our second to last point was about calorie intake. So as much as us mums worry about our calorie intake, we also need to worry about our baby and toddler calorie intake, but we want them to get the calories in. So first of all, we had a little post this week or earlier in the week about habitual hunger versus genuine hunger and how to tell the difference. So often genuine hunger for a feed at night will be at a variable time each night. So it won't necessarily be the exact same time each night, which is why it's hard to say, okay, if your baby has slept through till 3 a.m., never feed them before 3 a.m. again, which is the core night method and it's quite common. But if your baby is in that age range of sort of 0 to 8 months where they're going to go through growth spurts and have fluctuating needs in terms of food, it's really hard to say that that one feed a night they're going to have is going to always be after 3 a.m. So genuine hunger will generally highly fluctuate when they wake at night for that feed. Whereas habitual hunger will tend to be at the same times each night, almost that you can set your watch to it, or the wake ups between the feeds will be exactly 2 hours or exactly 4 hours. So your baby might wake at 11:15 p.m. for a feed, and then at 3:15 a.m. for a feed. And you'll look at your watch and it'll be exactly 4 hours later, which basically is just the end of a sleep cycle to the minute. And that's when you could say, okay, this is probably habitual hunger. And for some babies, it feels like genuine hunger. They feel like they're hungry because their bodies are very much used to ingesting those calories at night. So they haven't had as many calories as they needed during the day. So for them, you know, they're thinking, well, yeah, I am hungry. I need this feed. So we need to get more calories into them during the day. But the problem is that most babies won't overfeed during the day in order for you to cut their night feeds. So you're probably going to have to either reduce their night feeds down a little bit or space them out a little bit longer, and then work on really great feeds during the day. So if you're breastfeeding, really focused feeds, you know, especially if you're busy or you've got other kids, often you can be doing a quick feed and then you're distracted. So try to do really great focused feeds during the day, focusing on both sides. Often parents start out feeding one side or one breast, and then baby actually ends up needing two when they sort of hit 4 to 6 months, and they don't realize that might have changed, and actually baby's hungry for some more milk. So really good focused feeds. If you're doing solids, you know, really awesome solid food. If you're formula feeding, offering them a little bit more formula in their bottles than you have been, so that if they are going to increase their volume during the day, the milk's there waiting for them, rather than you know, they drink 120 mils, so you only ever offer 120 mils, whereas they might potentially want 150. So try offering them a little bit more during the day. Definitely don't skip feeds, so always offer them at least the set amount of feeds a day they should be having. So that can often be sort of between 3 and 6 feeds a day, depending on how old your baby is. And don't skip them thinking, okay, but he had 3 feeds last night, so I'm going to skip a couple today. Another question we often get asked around calories, hi Diane, I'm pretty sure you don't have any babies anymore, is do you have to quit breastfeeding? And no, you don't. We have probably just as many, if not more, exclusively breastfed clients on our books as we do formula fed. And we would never recommend that you stop breastfeeding in order to consolidate your baby's nighttime sleep. It's just not usually needed unless your baby's not thriving. In that case, you would be under a pediatrician or a lactation consultant, and they would be giving that kind of advice. So if anyone other than that tells you you probably need to stop breastfeeding in order for your baby to sleep through the night, I would be questioning that advice. And if you're happy breastfeeding, we can probably still increase the length of time that your baby sleeps for at night without you having to break that breastfeeding relationship. And then another one we often get asked about is reverse cycling. So what is reverse cycling? This is when they're taking in more calories at night than during the day often, or just a lot more than they need. And what happens is, especially around the sort of time where your baby gets really distracted, hi Rochelle, and they start taking really short feeds during the day and making up for it at night when they're not distracted and the room's nice and dark and it's, you know, really quiet and focused. And before you know it, they're having sort of 3 or 4 feeds a night at 8 months, and during the day they're barely on the breast for 2 minutes before they're popping off and they're just not hungry. And in that scenario, we would say they're reverse cycling and they're getting more calories at night than they are during the day. And we need to work on a plan to gradually decrease their calories at night and gradually increase their calories during the day. So I would never cold turkey cut those feeds at night and just let them cry it out all night or resettle all night. I would always do it gradually and increase their calories during the day gradually, so that the settling is really painless and quick and fast. Danielle Guthrie, I want to know when you're going to come work for us, Danielle. She loves our work and she knows us very well, but I think she should come work for us. My phone died, Stacey. Hope I didn't miss much. Don't worry, it'll be on the wall, and we're going to send you out the recording into your email. So strategies to reduce your nighttime calories, because I've said you need to reduce them in order to increase your daytime calories. This is for your babies, not you, mum. Is try offering one side, not 2. So after I've told you to offer 2 sides during the day, if you're breastfeeding at night, try offering one side instead of 2, and then during the day offer 2. So you're increasing the daytime calories. If your baby is waking every 2 hours overnight, a good technique is simply to resettle for every second wake up. So if baby went to bed at 7 and woke at 9, you would resettle at 9 because you fed at 7. And then they woke at 11 and you would feed them at 11. Then they wake at 1 and you would resettle at 1 and you would feed them at 3. So that stretches them out from feeding every 2 hours to every 4. And then I guarantee you the next day they're going to be so much hungrier and take much bigger feeds during the day. You can halve the time at the breasts. So if a full feed for you is say 10 minutes, you can whip them off after sort of 5. That can be quite hard to do because often it'll be mid letdown, but it is worth a try if you're trying to reduce nighttime feeds. If you're bottle feeding, it's quite simple. You just cut down the volume. So I would recommend cutting about 30 mils a night from a bottle. And I saw a lady asking earlier about cutting a bottle. So you can pretty easily cut 30 mils a night from a bottle and increase daytime bottles in response to that. Or if you were offering a bottle every 2 hours, like the breastfeeding example, you could simply skip the bottle every 2 hours and go resettle and then bottle. So you extend the time between bottles to 4 hours overnight. Did your course and had a perfect 7-night sleep through run this week. Gone to rubbish. Oh no, ear infection, Alice. Just started rolling and refusing solids. Well, Alice, you've got our notes and you know what to do. So that's the really awesome thing, is that if it worked before, I promise you it will work again. So if it worked really quickly, get that ear infection out of the way, get those antibiotics and that sort of thing, and then just start again. And it'll probably be half the time that it took you last time. It will work. 4-month-old only sleeps for 10 minutes at a time during the day and won't resettle, Jess. That is quite a young age to be having really short little sleeps. I would be probably having a chat to your doctor just to make sure there's nothing going on there in terms of either hunger or intolerances or reflux or anything like that before I would work on definitely some assisted napping, which I talked about at the start of this lecture. So once it goes onto the Facebook page, you can go back and listen to it. And I think in your situation, I would definitely work on some assisted napping to get those naps happening for a bit longer. Okay, so that's strategies to reduce your nighttime calories so that you can increase your daytime calories. And then, Jackie, not sure if you already covered this, but I'm wondering what to do about consistent 5, 6 a.m. wake-ups. Yeah, early morning wake-ups, I could probably do a whole seminar just on those, so I probably will. But daylight savings in like 2 weeks. Don't worry about it. In 2 weeks' time, all your early morning wake-up problems will be gone. So wait till then. If it's still a problem, then we'll do a seminar on early morning wake-ups, because it'll probably take you 2 weeks to solve it. So it's not worth the effort right now. Okay, the other thing that about calories that I want to touch on is solids. So why do solids really matter in terms of consolidating nighttime sleep? Well, they do. They really do matter. So things which do matter in terms of solids is iron. We would think that when we get low in iron, we get sleepy and tired. But unfortunately for babies, the opposite happens. And neurologically, they really need the iron to sleep. And their sleep tends to fall apart if they are anemic or low in iron. So once they start on solids, it's important to consider iron and whether they're getting enough from things like their fortified cereals and red meats and stuff like that. Carbohydrates. As much as us mums kind of, veer away from carbohydrates, your babies need carbohydrates. So your root vegetables, so your kumara, your potatoes, sweet potatoes, and then things like your rice and oats, quinoa, millet, all that kind of stuff. Your babies need carbohydrates. That's what's going to sustain them and enable them to not wake up so much at night time hungry. Basically, if you would consider a meal diet food for you, then it's diet food for baby. So if I had a whole bowl of broccoli for my lunch, that would be diet food for me. So my 8-month-old, if I give them a bowl of broccoli, that's diet food for them. If I give them a bowl of broccoli with some carbohydrates, so some mashed up kumara or sweet potato and some protein, so maybe some pureed chicken as well, then I've got more of a complete meal there and I can be confident they're not going to be hungry at night. So I touched there on the protein a little bit. And this is really important. So if you are wanting to consolidate your baby's nighttime sleep, they do need to get enough protein during the day to not have those hypoglycemic dips at night and wake up hungry. So the food sort of recommendations have changed a little bit, and meat is basically a first food now. So really tiny little bits you can start with if you want to. Otherwise, you could begin to introduce it as a second stage food. But they do need to be having their meat. So unless you're a vegetarian, and if you are and your baby's going to be a vegetarian, then I would have a chat to a dietitian to make sure that you've got a really balanced diet for them. But if they're not, then you can start introducing things like beef and chicken and fish to get that protein into them during the day to help their nighttime sleep. Yes, nighttime weaning, we've covered it a little bit, Elizabeth, so maybe go back and listen when I've finished talking. The other things that are going to help your nighttime sleep are omega-3, zinc, B12 and tryptophan. So these things are all really important for sleep in general, and most of them support the neurological pathways and transmitters associated with sleep. So making sure they're present in your baby's diet, and especially your toddlers, because toddlers generally become fussy eaters sort of after 12 to 15 months, and often they are lacking hugely in these things which they need to neurologically support their baby's sleep. The other one to consider is how your baby is getting their solids, and whether it's traditional weaning or baby-led weaning. If it is baby-led weaning, then potentially their nighttime sleep will involve a feed for a bit longer than if it was traditional weaning, simply because they won't be consuming the same volumes as a baby who's having the pureed food. But a really interesting seminar that I went to at Massey University recently, and it was a nutrition seminar, and Dr. Anne Louise from Otago University was there, and they were presenting their study on baby-led weaning, and she was just going over the importance, if you are doing baby-led weaning, of making sure that basically every single meal is really well-rounded in terms of protein, fats, carbohydrates, and that sort of thing, rather than I think a lot of baby-led weaners end up offering a lot of fruit and a lot of just vegetables, and they kind of forget about the proteins and the fats and the carbohydrates, because traditionally those things come in the form of things like baby rice and pureed chicken. So if you are doing the baby-led weaning, you need to get really creative in making sure that they are getting that at every meal, and that will really help their nighttime sleep as well. Is it true no protein at night before 10 months, Laura? Yes. I mean, it's not like some kind of hard and fast rule, but protein at dinner time can definitely impact on your baby's sleep at a young age as they wake up to digest the meat overnight. So it is best given at lunchtime if you can. And it's actually quite a good kind of philosophy to follow, because once your babies are even over 10 months, they can start, walking around 11, 12 months, and then they're just so exhausted by dinner time, but they often don't eat very well. So if you've given them a fantastic lunch of everything they need, it doesn't matter so much if dinner that night is not as well balanced as lunch was, because they had a fantastic lunch. So, and especially lots of mums go back to work at around 12 months, and they're picking their kids up from daycare and coming home, and you can be confident if they had a great lunch at daycare, which was a cooked dinner, then if you're walking in the door at 5 o'clock and dinner ends up being either store-bought baby food or maybe just some yogurt and toast because it's one of those nights, there's not a huge panic because they had a great lunch. Controversy around giving your baby rice cereal before a year. Shauna, there's no controversy in my opinion, and that's just based on the science of it. Megan from Nourish Nutrition has a fantastic blog on her website on baby rice cereal, so you can go and read that if you want. She's nourishnutrition.co.nz, and she's kind of on the same page as us in terms of the science around all of that stuff, and the science doesn't say that there's any controversy around baby rice, so if you want to use it, that's cool. And interestingly, the professor from Otago University who's just done the massive study on baby-led weaning, she actually recommended putting baby rice on things like toast for the baby-led weaned babies, because it was just such an easy way to get iron into them. So if you are baby-led weaning and you are worried about your baby's iron, just try making a paste with the baby rice and smearing it on a toast finger. Maybe put some mama underneath it, or some mashed banana or avocado, and then bang, you've got the iron into a baby-led weaned baby. Oh, cool. Well, I feel like I have talked a lot very quickly. Kirsten, great tip. Can I get more food into a bub at lunch? I can get more food. Yeah, totally. At lunchtime, they eat way better than at dinner time. So focus on lunchtime, 100%. And then dinner time can just be kind of easy and something vegetarian, like some mashed vegetables, or a vegetarian lasagna if they're older, or a vegetarian risotto if you can cook. Hey, Alistair. Trying to cut down night feeds. How do you resettle a 6-month-old who only settles after a full feed? Amanda, I'd go back and listen to the lecture, because if your baby's still hungry in the morning after those night feeds, they potentially still need those night feeds at 6 months. And it is pretty normal for a 6-month-old to need 1 or 2 feeds a night. So I'm not sure if it's in excess of that, but 1 or 2 breastfeeds a night for a 6-month-old could potentially be all they can get through on at this stage. And that would depend on whether or not you started solids as well. So always good to kind of have an individual look at the baby when we're considering how many feeds or whether they can sleep the full 12 hours at night. And to be honest, a lot of 6-month-olds can't, or they can for a week, and then they hit a growth spurt and they go back to needing a feed. So it's often not worth the drama of trying to get a 6-month-old to sleep 12 hours at night when one feed will kind of see them through for a couple more months until they're really well established on solids, and then you can be really confident they're not going to wake up hungry or having a growth spurt. Melissa, my 15-month-old wakes 7 to 10 times a night and is still breastfed, so area so well as the 90th percentile, but screams during the night. I can't resettle, sleeps okay, dark room, freaking him out. No, I don't think the dark room's freaking him out. I think it's probably just that sleep association where we talked about earlier, when they do need your help to get back to sleep or they're going to bed overtired, they can tend to wake up screaming like something's really wrong because they're being really ripped from that very deep sleep. So I would consider whether they're overtired or whether they are probably progressively overtired because their nighttime sleep has been broken for so long. They'll be carrying a lot of sleep debt. So you'll probably find you need a very early bedtime for a while to kind of get on top of that. And help, just get on top of that sleep debt. It's so detrimental to nighttime sleep. I can't stress enough how much sleep debt really ruins nighttime sleep. Is there a 10-month-old sleep regression? I can't remember having issues with my first. Kind of around that movement stage. So if they're beginning to roll or crawl, it can lead to a sleep regression pretty much. So that could be starting to happen. Gemma, so I've started solids. She loves it. Best to give a big lunch and then pureed veggies at night or fruit. Yeah, I wouldn't give just fruit for dinner. I tend to give the fruit as a dessert or some fruit and some Greek yogurt to get some protein into them. But yeah, a vegetarian dinner and a really great lunch, Gemma, is always a good idea. Okay, so I really wanted to talk to you about the next seminar which we're going to do, and fingers crossed that Webinar Ninja does not die on us for the next one. I think we probably underestimated just how popular tonight's webinar would be, so we'll be prepared for it next time, don't worry. And it's going to be self-settling strategies which won't compromise your parenting style and will suit your baby's temperament. So we're going to have a really good look at what your baby's temperament is, so you can sort of go through the stages with us and work out what your baby's temperament exactly is, and then what techniques will suit that baby versus not suit that baby, or work for that baby versus not work for that baby, because they're all different. We're going to send you out a comprehensive workbook which you'll be able to print and download, and then you'll work through the workbook as we run through the seminar, so you won't forget anything that we've talked about, and you'll be left with a workbook filled out with the exact settling technique that's going to work for your baby to teach them to self-settle. Then we're going to have a discussion around parenting styles, because there are so many different parenting styles, and making sure that the settling technique is going to suit your parenting style and your baby's temperament. And if it does both of those things, then you're going to be super consistent with that technique, and it's going to work to teach your baby to self-settle and sleep awesomely for you. And then we'll look at the full range and spectrum of sleep training. So we'll look at the full gentle techniques right the way through to our more traditional cry-based techniques, and we'll explain 100% how to do those techniques and how to put it into practice, what to expect, how it will probably happen, some examples of what goes wrong, and so they won't go wrong for you. But you will have a really comprehensive how to put this technique into place for your baby. So you can get off the computer that night with your workbook filled out with all the supporting information in there, and you can start your self-settling that night or that weekend and work on teaching your baby to self-settle. So that's going to be our self-settling seminar. And if you have registered for tonight's seminar and you jumped onto Webinar Ninja and we weren't there, we're going to send you out an email with the lecture you've missed, and then we'll also send you out a super introductory price to our self-settling seminar with the workbook. So I think it's like $19 for those people who did register for tonight's webinar. So you can register for tonight's webinar, grab the special introductory price, or if you get the email talking about the introductory price, you can share it with your friends. That's cool. That'll have the link in there to the really awesome cheap price. And then I think for $19, you'll get our seminar, our online webinar, and the workbook emailed to you, which you can print and fill out and work through with us through that seminar, working out a really great settling strategy for you and your family, which isn't going to compromise your parenting style. And you can go back to it when your baby gets sick or goes through a little regression. You know, you'll have the notes there and you'll actually know what you're doing in a really comprehensive way, and you'll feel confident because you'll 100% know what you're doing. So thank you so much for coming onto Facebook Live and joining me. When is it? Really great question. It is going to be the week before Labour weekend. So the date for that is early October, but I'll put it in the email for you guys. So just before Labour weekend, you'll get all that information to sign up for that webinar. And I'm anticipating lots of people going away for Labour weekend, coming back after Labour weekend, and possibly needing to work on their children's sleep because you went away for a holiday. And that's generally how our kids punish us when we take them away on holidays, is they don't sleep too great. So sign up for the webinar before Labour weekend and attend it. Again, if you don't attend it live because something happens, we'll send it to you recorded and you'll always have the workbook to go through. If you do manage to attend it live, we'll have the live Q&A happening so you can ask us questions in there. Fill out your workbook and you'll leave the webinar knowing exactly how you can settle your baby and how you can teach them to self-settle, and you'll have all the information. So if you thought technique A was going to suit your baby, but 24 hours in you're like, actually I need technique B, you've got the information in your workbook, you've got the seminar there in front of you, you can go back and listen to it, and you'll be able to put that into practice with your baby. So I really hope you join us for the next seminar in just before Labour weekend. We'll send out the details. Thank you so much for coming over to Facebook tonight. I'm sorry if I missed your question. I've drunk sort of half my water. I'm so thirsty from talking so much. But it's been fantastic to see you all here. If you missed the start, Facebook does record these and it will be on the wall for you to watch. So that's perfect. Just jump in when I finish yabbering and watch it from the beginning. I think it takes about 5 minutes to load onto the wall. And all our other Facebook Lives are on the wall, so you can scroll down and read them at any time. And keep an eye on our website for sign-ups for future webinars and that sort of thing. Otherwise, if you've registered for tonight's one, we'll flick you out an email this week with a recording, so you can watch the whole thing and see my pretty slides that are in front of me on my laptop that you currently can't see. And you can have a read over it and watch the lecture again in your own home. So thank you for coming over to Facebook. And I am going to go and drink the rest of my water now. And have a great Friday night, guys. I hope you actually get some sleep, especially over the weekend. All right, bye.